Former Brooklyn Center police officer Kim Potter goes on trial later this month, but tonight a behind-the-scenes look at what happened after the killing of Daunte Wright.
And it comes from the former police chief, Tim Gannon, who was forced to resign because he would not fire then-officer Kim Potter. Tonight, Gannon is breaking his silence, talking to Tom Lydon of the Fox 9 Investigators. Tom.
Randy, Kelsey, it is a wide-ranging interview. He would not go into detail about Kim Potter because he will likely be called as a witness at her trial. But he had plenty to say about the protests, the activists, and the mayor who wanted him gone.
It ended my professional law enforcement career. It did.
Tim Gannon is a man without regrets. He's also without a job.
I just wasn't ready to give it up.
After spending 27 years with the Brooklyn Center Police Department, it all fell apart in just 48 hours. The former chief forced to resign last April after Officer Kim Potter killed Daunte Wright.
I just shot him.
Why did you think it was important for the public to see that video?
Tom, of all the decisions I made, which I think I totaled them out to be 100 decisions in 2 days, that was probably one of the easiest ones, to release that video. I wanted the community to know that we were going to be honest, transparent, and if it looked bad, it looked bad, but I was going to get it out there to the public because I thought that's what my obligation as a police chief was to do.
The chief released the video the very next day, but not soon enough for the crowd that gathered that first night. Initially at the crime scene, then at the police station. The crowd growing with each passing hour. Gannon says he feared another third precinct.
Soup cans, pop cans, bricks, all sorts of different things. We had low-level fireworks that were launched at us. It was unbelievable. In almost 30 years of police work, I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen that level of violence and aggression expressed towards police officers in my whole career. I've just never seen that.
It was that aggression of the police that really just turned everything up. And
Jailani Hussein was also there and says he tried to broker a peace, but was told the chief was too busy to talk. He says police actually energized the crowd that night by turning the police station into a militarized zone.
at that moment when the problem could have been solved very simply, because no one from our side made any aggression to the building until they came out with their riot gear and stood in front and created a line. Said, here's the battle, now you come.
By Monday morning, Mayor Mike Elliott told the chief he needed to be at a 10 a.m. community meeting before his press conference.
I walked in, and to be honest with you, Tom, I didn't recognize very many, if any, citizens from Brooklyn Center. It turned out to be a number of activists from Minneapolis and St. Paul that the mayor had invited in to give, basically to ridicule the way that I had handled the protest the night before.
Backed by the mayor, the activists wanted Kim Potter fired immediately.
And I said the officers do due process like any other police officer or city employee that we currently employ. There's a process. Nowhere in the policy does it say you can disregard this policy if you have political pressure. It doesn't say that. So I did what I thought any other police chief would do.
We asked one question, what happened? Which the whole public and everybody wanted to know. And he said he didn't know what the reason was.
Jailani Hussein was also at that meeting. He says the chief was defensive, couldn't answer the most basic questions, like why had Daunte Wright been stopped to begin with.
He is displaying exactly the problem with law enforcement. Accountability and transparency is critical for any institution and organization.
What about due process?
And due process.
For the officer.
Absolutely.
How do you balance both?
Daunte Wright being killed in the manner that he was, and for us to get that video available for the public on the next day was critical. That's transparency.
And he did that.
Yes. Now, with that information there, there's enough information for them to make a determination about what decisions that they make about the officer.
Meanwhile, the chief had another problem. The BCA was bailing on his 11 a.m. press conference.
In talking to Drew Evans, the superintendent, he stated that was because I had elected to show the video so early. And that was against what their recommendation is.
Because you decided to show that video of the shooting of Daunte Wright, the BCA said, we're out. We're not going to show up at your press conference.
That was the explanation I was given by the superintendent.
After getting off the phone with the BCA, the activists he had met with earlier were now at an employee entrance to the police department.
And at that time, I saw my commanders, my senior commanders, all three of them, were holding people back from coming in from the south door. They were there, and they had been escorted over to the police department by the mayor, and the mayor was with them at the time.
Reluctantly, the chief granted them access to his press briefing, where he would show the body cam footage.
This was an accidental discharge that resulted in the tragic death of Mr. Wright.
And while there was tension with the mayor, the chief had the full support of the longtime city manager, Kurt Bogany.
This employee will receive due process, and that's really all that I can say today.
You have talked about her having due process, although Daunte Wright did not get due process in that situation.
What it devolved into with having the activists there was it kind of moved into a rally. And that wasn't my intention. My intention was to be able to answer questions and get my message out there. But unfortunately, it wasn't allowed to happen that way.
You believe the activists had Mayor Elliott's ear, that they were instructing him what to do?
I absolutely believe that.
That Monday afternoon, at an emergency council meeting, Mayor Elliott was given emergency powers over the police department. But he still couldn't fire Kim Potter or Chief Gannon. Only the city manager could do that, and Bogany refused. So the council, at the mayor's request, voted 5-1 to fire the city manager after 15 years of service. In a statement, Bogany said, "I lost my job. I still have my integrity."
So as the city manager was escorted out of his position, I walked up to the deputy city manager, who was appointed an acting city manager, and I asked him point blank, I said, "Am I still the police chief?" The mayor, who was not addressing at the time, leaned in and said, "You are for now."
Monday night, the protesters were back, hundreds more than before. There was now a barrier surrounding the police station and backup officers from around the metro. The commanders on the ground wanted the city to declare it an unlawful assembly.
Turn around and go!
I believe it was Colonel from the State Patrol that said, "We need to have this declaration because the officers are going to be injured. We need to move in and stop this riot." The mayor could not make a decision. I put that WebEx on mute. I turned to the mayor and I said, "Mayor, we need to have a decision." He looked me in the eye. He got up and he walked out of my office. I took that to mean that he was delegating the authority for me to make that decision.
An unlawful assembly was finally declared, and the mobile command moved in, arresting 40 people. By Tuesday morning, the chief got an email from Kim Potter. She was resigning. He then got a call from the interim city manager.
And he basically told me in no uncertain terms that there was going to be a leadership change within the police department, and I was no longer going to be the police chief.
Gannon was allowed to resign instead and retain benefits from 27 years of service. The days that followed would lead to more protests and 100 more people arrested. Only 9 days later did police start talking de-escalation.
The one thing that I think that can be so critical, and it's simple, and it's a value statement, it's de-escalation. Yeah. We all need to relax. Law enforcement, citizens, everyone, we need to relax in this moment to get through this week.
But 8 months later, no one can even agree on the lessons we've learned, if any. How do we avoid the vicious cycle between police and protesters? How do we balance free speech and public safety? Or transparency with due process? The former chief still believes he did everything by the book, even while others believe that book needs to be rewritten.
He could have said that day that this is one of the worst tragedies that have happened in my time, and I'm disappointed that it led to the death of Daunte Wright. And I have no answers because I expected this police officer to act much better.
I lost my job, but I did it by doing the right things. And I don't want any other police leader to feel that they'd have to do something that they don't believe in. That's what I thought I did. And I paid for it with my job, but I wouldn't change anything.
And the chief wasn't the only one to leave. Since April, 14 officers have left the Brooklyn Center Police Department. 2 other top administrators for the city have also left. We've been reaching out to Mayor Elliott for the last 3 weeks to get his side of this story, but he has not even responded to our calls or emails.
And Tom, did the BCA have any comment for not showing up?
They did. They reached back out to us. They have a very different take on this, as you might imagine. They said they did not want to appear to have endorsed what the police chief was saying, and they say as a general rule they don't show up. when they are actually investigating the department itself. Although I have seen them show up at events and at least describe their process for an investigation. And that clearly they were planning on doing, but did not in this case.
All right. Thank you, Tom.